Hello. 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 We are live.
Yeah.
Awesome. Hello, everyone. So, I am Danasa. If you are subscribed to the Action VFX YouTube channel or have seen some of the tutorials, then you probably know me. I do a bunch of VFX tutorial on the channel. And here with me, we have Caleb from FilmPack. Hello, Caleb.
Hey, Nasa, thanks for having me on.
Yeah, awesome. It's really nice to have you on too. So could you talk a little bit more about FilmPack and what you do?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I can give you the hour-long version, but I'll slim it down to like a minute.
Yeah.
So I'm Caleb. I founded FilmPack in 2017 after about 7 years of being kind of freelance filmmaker, video editor, and through that time span of just being a freelancer, I just had this ongoing pain point that a lot of the stock footage that I wanted to use was either overpriced or not the quality level I wanted, or both. And I thought, man, there's got to be a solution. And so I just started shooting and put out a small collection of footage for the world, and it was received well, and then grew from there. And yeah, it's been quite the ride. It's been super fun. You know, big learning experience, but yeah, FilmPack has been, it's been a life-changing venture for sure.
Yeah, it's life changing for me too because we use a lot of we use a lot of film pack plates on our tutorials, and they're all like really great and high quality and just really perfect to like increase the production values of our tutorials,
Oh, and
especially coupled with our VFX elements. That's just yeah.
I love seeing it too. I follow Action VFX obviously on all the channels, and to see like a shot that I got at some point, or that our team got, and then to see it like just transform, a day to night, and then lightning and stars and fire, like, it's so cool to see some of those things. It's inspiring to see what, a, VFX professional can do to somewhat maybe ordinary and boring shot.
Well, it's not really ordinary and boring because if they're not cool, I wouldn't pick them to use for tutorials.
Hey,
Because
some of them have been, and you've made them cool. So
yeah. Um, so today in this live stream, essentially we are going to showcase some VFX shots, and then I'm going to go through them. And these VFX shots are the VFX shots that I did using FilmPack as the background plate, and then I added some action VFX elements on top to transform the plate into something else. And yeah, so let's take a look at the VFX shots that I'm going to go through.
yeah, man, can't wait. So sick. Love
Yeah.
it, man. So
Yeah, they're
cool.
all like really cool background plates. And what I did, I just added a bit more, some pepper on top of the
Yeah.
plate that is already looking really good. And we just pushed it a little bit more.
Yeah. Yeah. Those are examples where I feel like they were kind of cool shots already, and then it's like just make them top, top notch.
Yeah.
So cool. I'm excited to see how you did all that, because it's beyond me.
All right. So I did all those in After Effects. So we are going to go to After Effects here. So here is my After Effects project. So we're gonna go through each of the shots one by one, and we're going to start with the simpler one first, which is this one. So if we solo this background plate here, this is the plate that we have, and it looks so good. Even like without the VFX, it's already looking like something straight out of like a sci-fi movie, or like a Jason Bourne or a James Bond movie, you know. So it's already like looking really cinematic. And of course, you can get this on FilmPack. And I added a bunch of stuff, like I added some snow elements, and then I also added a lens flare. So I'm going to go through, I'm going to basically redo the shot from scratch. And yeah, so let's start. First, I'm going to basically hide all of this that I've already done. And here in After Effects, we have this icon called the shy icon, where if you click, and that it would basically, it would have like this little person, and then this person would just like hide behind like there's a wall. And then if we click on here, it's going to
Hmm.
hide all the elements. I mean, all the layers. So yeah, so that's how to easily hide a layers in After Effects. So here first, let's bring our first element, which is this free snow effects from Action VFX. So this is an element that you can get for free on the website right now. If you go to actionvfx.com, you will get like this snow. We have like a couple of more, several more others of this like variations, but I'm only loading one here. So the elements, so if you're just getting started with VFX, like for example, you're an editor or maybe someone who has never edited a video before and just started getting VFX. So one of the things that happens a lot when you're compositing, like when you're trying to put elements on top of like a background plate, is that the elements that you download would have a black background like this. So so of course you want to remove the black background. There are actually many ways to do that, and the most common ways to do it is to just use blending modes. So blending modes, here we don't have the blending mode. So if we click on toggle switch, we'll have the blending mode on After Effects. So to remove a black background, there are two blending modes that you can use. The first one is add. So add, just like the name suggests, is basically just plus or adding numbers, because the color black is basically the value of black is 0. And because the value of black is 0, when we plus it with the values of the background, it would become the value of the background. So that's how, that's one way to remove a black background. However, the problem with that is it also brighten some of the other elements that are not black, because because the operation is plussing the values of the layer on top and the layer at the bottom. So if the layer on top already has certain values, it would just add, the values would be added and it would become brighter like this. So another so if we don't want to have like this over bright result from the ad, another thing that we can use to remove the black background is to use screen.
Yeah, and screen, I'm going to interrupt for a second. I feel like
Yeah.
sometimes the blending modes, it's something that maybe young editors, filmmakers kind of overlook. And
Yeah.
I've had, pretty experienced, video guys, filmmakers who don't understand blending modes. And
Hmm.
it is so important to like have a good grasp. And maybe you don't have to understand every single way
Yeah.
that each one of those are different, but to know just the basics, that's been like very very pivotal for my editing past. So
Definitely.
anyway,
Yeah.
stress how important this
And
is.
yeah, I mean, like one of the ways, like when I first getting started with VFX, something that I would what I've done is just flip through all the blending modes. Like I just added elements and just flip through all the blending modes and see
Yep.
how blending modes result and stuff like that. So yeah, so another way to remove like the black background is to use screen. And you notice like the difference between the ad and the screen. So the screen is kind of like similar with ad, which is that the black values, the values that are like low, are being plussed, so the background just came through. But the difference between ad and screen is that screen would try to essentially make sure that the values that gets added will not go overblown. So they basically, with screen, they put like a cap on like the values. So yeah, here we also have a comment. You can also use lighten or screen. Hardly use add for blending modes. Yeah, so lighten is also the same, also result in a similar way. And basically, like this group here, usually like in After Effects, they would group each of the blending modes, and each of these blending modes would essentially have a similar operations on how they work, but just resulted like slightly different, you know. So yes, you can use screen, you can use screen, you can use lighten, you can use add. And then another way to remove a black background is to just use the luminance of the layer itself to generate an alpha channel. So if we solo our layer here, and if we look at the alpha channel, it's all like a solid white. You know, After Effects immediately assign, because the file itself doesn't have any alpha channel, so After Effects just assign a solid white alpha values to the layer. And of course, for those who don't know, alpha channel is basically the channel that allows transparency. So what we're going to do is we're going to use this value that exists on the RGB channel, which is this white value of the snow, and use that, basically move that to the alpha channel. Basically, have the alpha channel reference that. So we could do that by typing unmold here in After Effects, and After Effects has this unmold preset, which essentially contain two effects. One is shift channel. So what shift channel does is it's very, you know, explanatory here, which take alpha from which channel, and we're going to take it from the lightness, the brightness of the layer. And then, so if we disable the solo here, after we apply the shift channel, it still has like a little bit of like a leftover black values from the background. So we add remove color matting to remove those black colors.
And now, Danasa, is this the way you would recommend doing the overlay, or would you recommend just the simple blending mode one?
I mean, it's really depends on the project, you know. In most cases, it's always better to do it like this to have an actual alpha channel, because when you use screen, you don't actually create an alpha channel. You know, it's basically just a blending of two image. You know, if we solo the layer here, we don't have an alpha channel. But if we use the unmold process, it would create an alpha channel. So it's just a bit more like truer to what it should be, you know, if we actually generate an alpha channel.
I think like me as an editor who I spend, 95% of my time actually in Adobe Premiere Pro. Sometimes, or Premiere Pro, sometimes when I get into After Effects, I'm like, okay, how did I do these things? So the blending mode seems easier, but it's nice to know some of these, more advanced, but, correct ways to do it. So it's good to, it's good to hear. This is, a learning experience for me here too.
Yeah. But also the key to VFX is as long as it looks right, it doesn't matter the process. So in a lot of elements like snow here, where the elements itself is just like a really simple, it contains like a really simple color, which is the black values of the background and then the white values of the foreground, of the snow. So it's actually, there isn't really much of difference if we use like the unmold process or use the screen process, you know. So in a lot of like smoke, like white smoke or like snow, if you could just get away with using like blending modes, I would just use blending modes. You know, it's just so much faster that way. And here we have a question: would that process also work for explosion and serial explosion since they have multicolors within the elements? No. So that's the thing, because like you said, explosions have multiple colors. You have the fiery red, and then the yellow brightness, and then if it has smoke, it has like a gray smoke. So you cannot do the unmold process, because the unmold process only picks, one channel to select whether it's red, green, or blue, or luminance or lightness, which is essentially just the general values of all the RGB channels. So yeah, so if for things like explosions, that's something that you have to either do it manually or like key it out. You know, it's not something that you can just use some tricks using the blending modes and channels. You know, in order in order for blending modes and the channels to work, it usually works for elements that contain only at least like two colors. You know, it's like monochrome images, because you only pick one color, which color channel that you want to keep, and the rest will be, deleted or something like that. So for multicolored stuff like explosions, using normal blending modes or using the unmold process, it's not gonna work. So it needs to already have an alpha channel on the file itself.
And did you have
So
another snow layer in here, or was there just one?
yeah, so here I have the snow, and then what I've done is I also added this falling snow, which is another snow elements collection that we have here at Action VFX. But this one is
Can you
this
solo
one is
that
not a
one?
free.
Can you?
Yep.
Let's see that. Oh, okay, so that's like kind
So
of the
this
snow in
is
the distance.
yeah. So here I'm going to bring the let's see.
Which I think that kind of, while you're doing that, that brings up a point for me of like, you know, trying to avoid we have to add layers, right, to make it look realistic.
Yeah.
But for the viewer to not think, oh, there's just like layers slapped on here, just to be
Exactly
as organic as possible. You know, like how some of the close ones are kind of blurred, right, because it has like the camera blur, and then the back ones are just small and in focus. And so I think that's like super important for anyone who's doing VFX work to think about how do I add very, very organic layers to a shot. So
exactly. And that's actually a good segue here, because I'm going to talk about that part. And so I'm going to turn all these layers here to the screen because it's easier. And basically, here we have a moving shot. And actually, the snow elements, because it's already like moving kind of towards like the right side, so it kind of already fooled our brain to think that the snow is actually already there. But if you really want to make sure that everything is looking right, you want to have this tracked into the shot. And basically, there are two ways to track the shot, to track a shot in After Effects, which is first is to do a 2D tracking. 2D tracking is essentially just picking a texture or a pixel, like a point on the shot, and basically make the object follow that point. But for things like this, it would actually much more beneficial to do a full 3D track, because the snow here exists basically within a space that where we don't have anything to track to. You know, if we add like for example, if we add a fire on top of this part of the building here, we could just track this texture and then have the fire follow that, or like if it's a smoke billowing out. But because the snow is between the camera and the our subject here, and there is nothing in between that we need to track, a solution for that is to just do a full camera tracking. So by using full camera tracking, which is we want to type in camera tracker, 3D camera tracker, and plug it into our plate. Oh, I already have another one here. So let's to delete that and redo that again. There we go. So now After Effects is going to analyze the shot and look at the points here, all the different points that exist in the plate. And from that, After Effects is going to generate 3D camera that basically they try to guess the movement of the camera as it was when this plate was shot, you know. So because we have the actual camera movement in 3D, we can then put our objects anywhere, and it would have like the correct parallax, you know, it would have like the correct movement, and we don't need to refer to like a point to make it stick. So here,
and a real quick and dirty way would be like, I mean, you could just like keyframe like anchor points, just like slightly left to right, right?
Exactly, yeah.
I mean, that's not quite as sophisticated as what we're doing here, but like it would probably get us 90% of the way there, maybe.
Yeah, especially for the snow, where you know everything is moving really fast, and so it's actually much easier if you just want to manually move the snow a little bit, you know, so it would create like a fake parallax. But if you really want to, you know, maybe if you really want to make sure that everything, like all the scale is correct and stuff like that, camera tracking is, you know, the way to go. So
yeah,
here,
so let's watch like a before and after too. I'm curious once we're done with this process.
Yeah, so here we have the 3D camera tracker.
Oh, wow.
And it's basically After Effects generate all these different points, and based on the parallax of each of these points that it tracked, After Effects figured out like, okay, so this 3D, so the camera is moving this direction, and like this point is the foreground, this point is the background, you know. So from here we can just right click here and either create a null on camera, or we can just go here and create camera. Boom. So now if we go to the 3D, let's go to the top. Here we have created a camera that basically mimics the movement of what the actual camera was during the shoot. So from here, we can turn our layer into 3D layers. So click on toggle switch and click on 3D. So now if we hit play, we see how it moves.
Interesting.
With the parallax, with the correct parallax. Yep. So now we can just move the snow around and basically make sure. Okay, let me select that red. There we go. There we go. So now we can just push this one, maybe this white snow here, to be on the back. So we can have multiple layers of snow and have each of those layers of snow to parallax with each other. Yeah. So here. Let's scale it up. Of course, I'm going to go through here really quickly, so it's not going to be as pretty as the final shot that we had earlier.
It makes me think of something. I mean, I don't know we've been in here for like 10 minutes or something, and it's like in my mind I'm like, oh man, this is gonna take so long to add this fire to this thing or this smoke shot, but so many times this process actually goes faster than I think, and many times it's the shot that wins over the client or wins over the viewer. And I feel like every time I've spent the extra effort to like get that cool VFX shot, I feel like it's always worth it. It just is.
Yeah.
And it goes faster. It always goes faster than I think.
Yeah, definitely. And we have another question here. So if you wanted to add, as you said, fire at the top of the footage, and the footage is orbiting, how would you make the fire look 3D since the element is really 2D? Well, it really depends on like the distance between of the fire and the camera, and also like the movement of the camera itself. Like for example, like the snow here, because the nature of the snow, because snow are basically just simple blobs of like white blobs. So when the 2D layer, this clearly 2D layer parallaxing with each other, we didn't really see like its 2D-ness, because everything's moving really fast, and then also like the snow is just like a blob, whereas a fire, as you ask here, Mr. In the Shadows Entertainment Group, fire is supposed to be 3D, and if you have like an orbiting shot and the fire wants to look 3D, it really depends like on the distance. Like if we are super far away like this, maybe you could get away with having a 2D fire on top, because as you can see here from the tower, it has a little bit of parallaxing, but it's not too much. Like this ladder here, we can see that it's parallaxing a little bit, but not a lot. So if we add fire here, because it's far away, so maybe we could get away with how we can get away with the 2D-ness of it. But if the camera and the fire is really close, and then you have the camera orbiting like that, then you might have to go with a 3D fire. Basically, it's all about just trying things out, see if you can get away. Like the motto of VFX is just cheat as much as you can, So yeah, if you could get away with just using a 2D layer and put it there, use 2D layer. If you have to create a 3D fire, then you have to create a 3D fire. Stuff like that.
Cool.
And yeah, so again, I'm not going to go add a bunch of stuff here, because we're gonna talk about the other shot as well. So one last thing that I added into this shot is I added a lens flare, which is part of our icon lens flare collection. So we have a bunch of really cool, and it's saving, there we go. We have a bunch of really cool lens flare elements here, and we can use that to just basically make things prettier, because I'm like J.J. Abrams. I like to add lens flare. When I have a shot and there's just I need to add something, but I'm not sure. Like I really need to add that icing on the cake. I would add lens flare because it just makes things prettier. So here on the lens flare, I'm going to freeze frame it so it freezes on this frame. So right click, time, freeze frame, and then we want to extend the freeze frame here. And then of course, because
Because
the
you're not
background
wanting
is,
it to like pulse like it naturally was.
I could, I mean, that could be something that because like the the duration of the lens flare is not the same as like
Oh, I
the
see.
plate.
Okay.
Yeah. So what we could do though is to play around with the opacity, to have the opacity like going up and down, pulsing. So here, let's freeze frame it, and then of course, because it has like a black background, we're going to turn it to, let's say, screen. Yeah, it added that extra bloom into the shot. And of course, if you're not liking, you want to have a bit more power to the lens flare, let's add curve, and then just you know add more brightness to it.
Nice.
And yeah, so this is the shot for the the factory with the snow. And of course, I'm using the free snow element. Sorry, the one free snow collection, and then the other the falling snow collection. And then the lens flare is from Icon Lens Flare, which is actually free if you are subscriber of Action VFX subscription. So it is actually part of our Action VFX free for subscribers initiatives, where if you are subscribed to Action VFX from the basic plan and up, you would have access to over 1,000 elements that you can get for free. Like here, we can see on the screen all the different elements that you can get. And also every month we would have like new different elements that would be free for that month. And for this month we have like the rain elements that is free, so you can get that if you're subscribed to Action VFX subscription. Again, subscribe to the Action VFX subscription, not the YouTube channel, so if you don't get confused. um, but yeah, so this icon lens flare here is one of the things that is free, and of course also the rain, which is one of our more popular elements. And yeah, so that was basically the free for subscribers. So go to the website right now and subscribe. And we're gonna go to the next shot.
Nice. It's a generous offer.
Thank you. so um, so for this shot, it's a very simple atmospheric shot of this really creepy lady. Well, I don't know. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to.
She's
Basically,
creepy.
of this lady walking, and we have, of course, the atmosphere of, so it looks like something out of like a horror movie, you know. So here I'm going to show you again how to use our elements, and this time we're going to use our ground fog collection. And yeah, so let's start here. I'm going to hide all the elements. Oh, sorry. Let's disable them first, and let's hide them.
And we're working
So
with a stationary shot here, which probably makes your life a little easier, right? Sometimes, I mean, I'm sure it's fun to work with the tracking and motion shots, or
yeah,
even the camera shake shots, which I think we'll maybe even get into on the next one. But
yep.
it's probably
Yeah.
sometimes nice to just get a lockdown tripod shot.
Yes, lockdown tripod shot. It's, when you're working in VFX and you have this lockdown type of shot, it's just godsend. Just like the comments here. Dude, what's up, Caleb? FILMPAC is literally a godsend. Exactly. Genius idea.
Hey,
You the man, brother.
hey, thank you, Mr. KW Jones. Love it. Love the encouragement.
I
Thanks, bro.
agree, Mr. KW Jones. I agree. So let's start with this shot here. So the first thing I want to add is, of course, the fog. I'm going to use our ground fog volume 2 collection. And I'm going to pick this low-lying fog and put it here. And of course, it has a black background. And like I said, usually when working with something that is, black and white, like smoke or snow, usually you could get away with just using screen or add, well, actually usually screen, so you don't get too much, overexposure. So here we have this, and let's see, let's put it down here. Actually around here, there we go. And then what we can do is, let's see, we could add some colors. So because the the fog is too bright here compared to essentially the atmosphere of the shot. What we can do, we can use curve, to like brighten and darken things down. But because it's only like a monochrome color, we only have like a white color exist in the shot. I usually, when in things like this, I would just use a tint and get a tint, and then pick the white color and pick like a white color of the shot. So immediately you would essentially get the white balance of the shot really quickly. And then of course from here you can just play play with the color. Maybe you want to make things a bit brighter, or just reduce the amount so it's not too dark. So that's basically just like a quick trick if you're dealing with smoke, snow, those kind of stuff, and you want to immediately get like a white balance of the shot really quickly, is to just use tint, and on the white color, pick on the white color that is exists on the shot. And same for the black color, you can pick like a black color that exists on the shot, so it would immediately just reset the color to the same as of the plate. And we have question here from Megan. So cool, looks real. As a beginner, which nature-inspired effect is most difficult to make to look organic? And what are tips you would recommend? Ooh, that's big. That's a big question. So nature-inspired effects. Oh, that's a lot. I mean, something that.
If I was to answer this, I would
Mhm.
say, and that's why I love, you guys tutorials and stuff so much, is fire. I feel like fire for me in my past, that's a hard one. I feel like generally, like depending on the shot, fog, rain, like snow, like sometimes those can be easy enough. Fire was always and is always like a tough one to add.
Yeah.
Um, I know, like I'm talking to the pro here on it, but that's what I would say, Megan, is fire to me sometimes is hard, but I think that Action VFX, they got a lot of tutorials walking through that, which I just need to watch all of them, I guess.
Yeah. Well, I agree. Fire is also very difficult. It's actually one of the longest effects that trying to get like my head wrap around it, like how it works. Because especially fire, depending on like the environment, if you shoot a fire on the bright daylight, it's going to look different if you shoot a fire on like a dark room. So getting to know how that works is something that definitely actually took me a while also. So yeah, I agree. And a tips that I could recommend if you were trying to do VFX just getting started is to just shoot a bunch of reference. Like FilmPack has a lot of like really cool plates, so you could look for reference there. I know, I remember there was like a really great like really big bonfire shot and
Yep.
FilmPack, so you could use that. So I would suggest, if you're just getting started, say you want to try create, honing your fire compositing skill, is to get that plate of that giant bonfire, put it on your After Effects or Nuke or whatever your program is, and then you add in the fire elements from Action VFX and do the fire side by side. Trying to make sure that your fire element is the same as the fire on the plate that was shot.
Yeah, and I
So
know
that's
we're working on fog right now, and I don't want to spend too long in the fire. But one other comment I'd say with fire is that what's tough for me is that it emits light. Unlike fog or snow or
yeah,
rain, which just is there, fire now it's like, if we try to put it in this shot, that okay, well, it has a reflection against the wall and all this kind of
yeah,
stuff. So that makes it tricky. But also, when you do it right, it can look really awesome. And also, fire is the actual one of the harder things to actually shoot in like real time, like to actually film real fire. It's like it's a headache. Permits or
yeah.
safety concerns. So if you can master the fire thing and with the VFX, that's like huge,
Yes,
huge benefit. So
exactly. Yeah. Anyway, we're going to go back to the shot now. So here we have, of course, our fog. And I want this basically fog to be on the other side of the room, because here we can see that we have this door here, this door frame. So I'm going to duplicate my plate, Control D, put it on top, and then I'm going to grab a mask, and I want to draw a mask on the plate that is on top. There we go. And if we disable the mask here, we can see that we have the mask. And let's play with this. There we go. And then we want to press MM to bring our mask properties, and let's feather it just a little bit. And yeah, there we go. Okay, so I'm going to play around with this just. And then I want to pull this mask here. Let's see if we can go this way. There we go. Okay, so here we have our fog, and then of course the fog looks two-dimensional. It's like plastered on top of everything here. And what I want is so here in After Effects, if you want to brighten your workspace, is you can just adjust the exposure. There we go. And what I want is essentially to have like this leg of this chair to be in between, to be inside the fog, instead of just behind the fog. So it's going to be like the in between. So to do that, what I want to do is first let's rename this one into the floor frame. And then I want to, let's duplicate it again and delete the mask, press M to bring out the mask. And what I want to do is I want to draw a mask shape for the leg of the chair.
And you pretty much always feather this kind of thing a little bit.
Oh, sorry.
Do you always like feather this kind of thing a little bit? I saw you did, the slight feather on the door frame because it's kind of out of, just slightly out of focus. Do you like, I guess in my experience, I always feel like even adding a little bit of feather helps a lot.
Yeah, because in reality, there is no like really sharp, like it's actually when you're compositing CGI objects, like when I was still learning VFX, one of the first thing they always told us is that there is no perfect thing in reality. So if you create a CG object, render it, and put it into your plate, the first thing you have to do is to blur it out.
Yep. Totally. So, it's kind of painful though sometimes because like, oh, it's this perfect, like in Photoshop, it's this perfectly crisp, clean thing. You're like, oh, this looks great. You put it in there, it's like, oh, it's totally it looks Photoshop. So
yeah,
it's kind of painful to add blur for someone, for a filmmaker. We're always trying to lock focus and all this stuff, and then to like intentionally just blur out something that could be perfectly sharp. That's kind of hard, but it makes a big difference. It helps blend in the shot better.
Yeah, even if you're just going to blur out, like for example here, even just blurring out 2 pixels, or 3 pixels, it really helps a lot. Yeah. So if we disable here, so this is without any blurriness. I don't know if you could see, and let's add like just 3 pixels of blur in the mask, and it would just really helps the shot.
And then, so now you're gonna let some fog go by this chair leg, but not all of it. Is that right?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So this essentially like the chair leg here is looking like it's on top of the fog. So we want to make it to be a little bit like in the middle. So what we can do is let's bring our mask again and reduce the opacity, so it looks like it's inside of the fog. And then because the fog is thicker at the bottom, so that means the bottom of our chair leg here needs to be a little bit more consumed by the fog. So let's create another mask here, and let's change this to subtract. And then let's feather it really high. There we go. So now
Oh, interesting.
the fog is now so the chair leg is now looking like it's inside of the fog, you know. And of course you can do that with the lady's feet too, but I'm not going to go through all the, because you're going to need to rotoscope this. So I'm going to use the rotoscope that I already have from the previous project here. And let's disable the height layer. And there we go. And here we have the roto of the feet that I did, and then I also added that subtraction at the bottom, so so to make it look like the feet is like submerged inside of the fog.
That's super helpful. I would have actually thought that you would have had to add another layer of fog to get that, but I'm just not as experienced as you. You got to just, yeah, that's pretty simple. You just kind of ramp
Yeah,
up the
I mean
opacity.
that could work also. You know, that could work also. Just adding another different element of fog. Oh, here we have a question. I think several things need to be combined in correct proportion in order to make a shot realistic. The right toning of the shot, the right blending, and the subtle volumetric effects and lens flares hard. Yeah, yeah, it's all, yeah, it's basically in creating like especially like a VFX heavy shot with VFX elements. There's no such thing as just drag and drop and then just hit render. You know, you have to think about like how this element affect the environment, how the environment affect the element. You know, and like here, like the right blending and right toning of the shot, is it matching with the color of, you know, the environment? Is the black levels correct? Is the white balance, is it correct? You know, is it on the right exposure? And then like we talked about, does it have the same blurriness? Does it have the same focus as the rest of the shot? So yeah, I agree,
Yeah.
it's not, there's no such thing as just adding elements and done, you know.
And Kartiki, if that's how you pronounce your name, I think that's a good point. And you brought up the lens flares again, and I'm wondering, Danasa, like, do you feel like lens flares can be almost used as a crutch, or I mean, not necessarily a crutch? That seems like negative, but like it can be a little bit of like, hey, this shot is not working, it's not blending well. Let me throw in a lens flare to kind of like obscure it a little bit and kind of cover maybe some of the imperfections. Do you feel like VFX editors kind of see it as that sometimes?
What I would say is I am guilty of that often. And I mean, like that could work, and also it could be a bit too much, you know, because lens flare doesn't always happens, especially like depending on your camera. You know, if the camera that you're shooting doesn't call for a lens flare,
Like
then
this
if you're
shot.
adding, yeah, yeah, like yeah, like this shot, and you're adding a lens flare on top, it would just breaks the shot because where's the light's coming from, you know? So
Yeah.
again, it really depends on the shot, and it's much better if you can get the shot already looking really great without the lens flare. But you know, you'll never know. Maybe even you just add the lens flare for the sake of it, and it's just to make things look pretty. That could work also. So yeah. So and then I'm going to add, back to the shot here, I'm going to add another layer of fog, and then we're going to move on to the other shot. So here I added this other fog here. That is, this is, oh, sorry, this fog here is a bit more like on the foreground, so it's perfect for to have this smoke like really close to the camera. And we are going to turn this to screen again because we can get away with it because it's just a white colored fog. And then let's copy the tint that we had earlier to here. There we go. And another thing that I want to do is, and this is another really fun After Effects trick, is that the fog, we have like a really bright like source of light on here, right? Um, so we have this really bright really bright light source coming from the other side of the room. And so what I want to do is I want to have like some parts of the fog to be brighter than, like for example, like this part here. Maybe this part is a bit more on the shadow, and this part is a little bit more on the shadow. So what we can do is to get curve, and we are going to, let's darken it up. And I want this curve to only affect certain areas. And if you use Premiere Pro, this is something that that you're probably familiar with, which is when you add in effects, you would have like the mask option in Premiere Pro, and this is something essentially the same as that. So if you want to go to the effects here at the drop down, and you go to the curve, you would have a compositing options. So what we want to do is we want to create our mask first on this layer. So I want this curve to only affect, say, this area here.
Mm.
There we go. But now the mask is now using it to is now being used to mask out the shot, which is not what we want. So we want to go to the here to curve and compositing options on the curve, and we want to hit plus. And if we disable the spline here, we can see that the curve is only affecting that area. So let's go to the mask, and we want to feather this, let's say 100, maybe a bit more. There we go. So that's a simple After Effects trick that apparently not a lot of people knew. I actually only knew about like this trick like a few years ago, and it's basically because it's like really down on the tab here, and I didn't really see it. And it's just like a really simple trick of having the effects only affecting certain part of the shot, so you don't have to use a bunch of like adjustment layers. And yeah, so this is the shot again. I'm not going to go super deep into making this super pretty. So I'm going to move on to the next one.
Nice.
Which is the sky replacement shot. Let this load. There we go.
And before we start on this one, Danasa, there was a question from Megan asking about what the favorite part of the process in creating these plates. Well, and thanks for loving FilmPac. When we are filming things, sometimes we're just trying to capture a basic shot, a family laughing on the beach or something. But then there's sometimes, like I would say that that walking shot that we just did, or some of these more like haunting, or maybe a haunted house or whatever type of shots where I'm really thinking about, okay, how could various filmmakers use this? And so that can be a really fun part, is thinking about how this footage is ultimately going to be used. And like we briefly mentioned earlier, sometimes the use cases are so broad. I think it's going to be one thing, and then someone like Danasa brings it in and takes it to a whole different genre, right? Of like, film, video, or ads. And so that it's cool being part of that process. And one more thing before I let Danasa jump into this yogi
Yep.
at Malibu Beach is that brings up a point is when I'm filming, when we're licensing our footage content, I feel like the editors, the actual filmmakers, like they're the artists here. I'm just like kind of supplying the paint, and you're like creating the masterpiece, and it's part of the process. I don't feel like we are creating it all. I feel like we're just doing a little bit to kind of help you, similar to Action VFX and all their elements and overlays. It's like we're trying to help you. We're trying to give you the paint, and you're the master painter, right? You're the artist. So anyway, I hope that kind of answers your question, Megan.
All right, that is a great answer, man. I mean, providing the paint is also, that's also work, So yeah, it's basically filmmaking. It's all collaborations. There's no people that are doing more work than the others. We're all like on the same boat. Like, even people that are just like makeup artists, and people who
Sure.
hold like the boom mic, or even like, well, focus puller is like really important. But like all different people are like, even things that are people that are not necessarily you might think that, oh, maybe I'm not important. No, you are important. In all filmmakings, there's no the ship would not sail without the crew. Essentially, I just made up that saying. I hope that sounds nice. um, um so here, let's go to the shot. So the original plate of the shot is, we have this lady here doing yoga. and we have this really nice sky, but we want to replace it, you know.
And what's interesting here too is I filmed this last fall, and I'm handheld, right? I'm at Malibu, low production,
Mhm.
just me and the model, and this is handheld, and so we got it's slow motion. We've got a little bit of shake, so I'm kind of curious how that factors in here with a little bit of camera shake versus a like smooth gimbal or tripod type shot.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. So we're going to go through that now because we're going to add some cloud here, and the cloud needs to stick into the shot. So uh, let's uh, let's disable. Let's hide all the layers here. Well, actually, including this one. Oop. So I forgot to disable all of them first and hide them. There we go. So the first thing we want to do is, of course, we want to add the cloud. But if we add the cloud would just sit in place. It would not track into the shot. So here we have this cloud volume 2 that I used. Let's just add this one cloud here. And for our cloud elements here, it already has the alpha channel. So we don't have to do anything with like the black background. And of course, it's not tracking into the shot, and we want to track the shot, and we could do like a 3D tracking, but it's a bit too overkill for this shot because we just want to add a cloud on the background. And because the parallax of the actual cloud and the actual sky here, because it's really far away, it looks like essentially the sky and the cloud here kind of looks like a flat, like a flat wall. So we could just do a simple 2D track on this quote unquote flat wall of the sky and the cloud. And we want to do the 2D track using a, a plugin in After Effects called Mocha. And we have Mocha AE, which came free with After Effects. So if you have After Effects, you have Mocha AE, and we want to bring it here into our plate. And let's delete the Mocha AE that I had previously. And we're going to go click on the Mocha symbol, and it's going to bring us into Mocha, which is an extension of After Effects, which is a plugin from Boris FX. And what I want to do is I want to track this cloud here. So Mocha is a planar tracker, which means instead of tracking just a simple point, it's tracking an area. And we have a really cool, like a really nice, quite contrast areas here with the cloud that we can just grab. So let's grab this X spline here, and we want to track. So I'm not going to go super deep into the Mocha here because we actually have a previous tutorial that also uses FILMPAC plates, where I just go through. I went through like the basics of Mocha. So if you want to learn more about Mocha, you can check out the link. The link is already on the chat. So here, I want to track just the position of this cloud because there's no like scale or rotation changes here. So let's just track this backwards. And now it's tracking. So
And
here you
one
can
thing
see.
I was going to say, Danasa, is from this example to the previous examples as well, is like the beauty of like subtlety and moderation. Because sometimes I think for beginners, myself probably too, sometimes whether it's color grading or adding effects, you want to go like all the way and make it like so obvious. But
Yeah.
I'm thinking even that fog shot, like the foreground where you added the kind of that second layer of fog. It's pretty dark. It's like you almost wouldn't even think or to notice it, but like that's what really sells things well, is when you can
Yeah.
really dial in the moderation, do just enough to make it like give the right vibe versus going all the way. Lens flares, everyone's guilty of sometimes just like you said, just all in on the lens flares because they look cool, but to really help sell the organicness of a shot, sometimes moderation is the way to go.
Yeah, exactly. And here I made a mistake with the track. So something that often happens is when you're tracking here. So I'm tracking this area of the cloud, and when it tracks backwards, uh it has like this rock here that's basically intruding with the track. So we want to make sure that uh, the point that we are tracking when we're doing a 2D track, whether it's point track or planar tracking, is to have that point always visible for the entire shot or that area. So I need to find another areas, for example, maybe just this part here, so we don't have to track this area, and we can just track that forward.
And so this just does a better job of tracking than what After Effects can do, like in their motion tracker. Is that why you use Mocha here?
No. So the After Effects tracker is a 2D point track, which
Got it.
means it's just tracking a point, and that would work if you just want to track like here. I
Like
actually
a
could
bird
get away
onto the
with
rock or something. If I want to do like a
exactly.
bird
Yeah,
on the right next to her, okay.
yeah. For example, you want to have like a bird perching on this rock here,
Yeah.
and it's just like it's a really visible, simple point here that you can track. Then that's you can just do a point track here. Whereas on the cloud here, we have the cloud and we have a little bit of contrast between the cloud and the sky, but it's not contrasty enough. So if we just tracking, say if we just track a point here, the After Effects would get confused. So for things like this, where we can see a little bit of texture, but it's not too contrasty, you could just use like a planar track, because planar track is a bit more generalized here, where it's basically reading all the color data that is inside here and track that. So yeah, so here I have this track and I can just close here and save. And then we want to create a new null layer. So null is essentially just an empty layer where you can just parent your stuff into this layer. And we're going to create track data and select the layer. Select the tracker that we just made, and then change the export option to transform, and we want to export it to the null, which is null number 3 here that we just created, and apply. So now we have that null, and then we can add some clouds. So let's add this cloud here. There we go. And we want to essentially parent it into the null. So now it's following with the shot, and then we can add some tint, and we can select like a white area of the sky here, just to give that a little bit, more of that white balance of the shot. And then what I like to do as well is I like to just get a solid and pick a blue color of the sky, and then just make it a little bit different. Okay. And then I want to create a mask and feather it. And then we want to reduce the opacity. So just to change the color of the sky just a little bit. And then just parent that to the null. So now we have this. And then of course now we need to have this rocks and our talent here in front of the cloud and the sky. And to do that, what we can do is we can duplicate our plate, put it on top. And because our talent and our rock here is much, much darker than the sky, we can essentially do luminance keying. So to do luminance keying, we're going to use extract here in After Effects. And if we solo here, solo our layer, so we only see that layer. And if we push our white point here, it's going to eat up all the bright areas in the shot. So this is basically when you are so if you're shooting a plate and the sky is usually, when you shoot a plate, you would have like the sky just solid white, and maybe your client wanted to have like clouds in it instead of just a solid white. And something that you could do is just to pull a really simple luminance key and add the cloud in there, So there we go. So this is without the luminance key. This is with the luminance key. Perfect. And of course, we have like our actors here. It's get eaten up a little bit by the brightness, by the luminance key. So what we can do is we can adjust the key to make sure that she's not, being eroded by it. Or you could do For example, here you could do like a very manual roto and just patch up like those missing areas. Like for example, I already have this, which is I just rotoed this area over, which is the area that got eaten away by the luminance key, and just patch that in,
Hmm.
and you would have this really simple sky replacement.
Yeah, now after my comment on moderation, I'm now curious to see like how dramatic actually could you make this shot, but that's for another live stream another day. It'd be kind of cool to see, like, I remember an old shot I did once where I actually made the background like a time lapse, but then the
Yeah,
person is in slow motion, and it's obviously it's not realistic, but it can be a cool kind of artistic shot. I'm curious like how
yeah,
dramatic you could get with shots like this.
yeah.
Um,
We
on
could
another
even
day.
add, yeah, another day, or we could add lens flare again, and just to see what it looks like. Hey, now it's a bit more dramatic.
Yeah, certainly. Yep.
Yep, that could work. Maybe not, but you'll never
I like
know.
the subtlety at the end of it. I kind of like that near the end of the light flare. I feel like it was kind of cool. But
Yeah,
yeah, all this, it makes me think like, man, I would like, I do little things like this, maybe once every few months where I have to like really get in and like do some sort of overlay or some sort of effect. I would love to at some point like have you actually critique some of mine, or that even made me think like maybe some of the, you know, um, customers of Action VFX, even some of the people that commented in, to be like send them for them to send us something or send you something, and then you kind of be
yeah,
like, here's what you could have done to sell this part better, or better yet, they send the After Effects file and you can actually dive in and do something for them to
yeah,
help it. But
definitely.
it's kind of a cool way to learn, is like what you're showing us, like all the things to do right, which is great, but also I think like learning what people generally do wrong, that can be super helpful too. So,
Yeah, I mean,
but
especially like you don't have like something that I always tell people when like trying out VFX is when getting critique, not don't just get critiques from people who work in VFX. Get critiques from a DOP, or a painter, someone that understands the visual language but not necessarily in VFX, so they have a bit more objective view of your work. Because if you give me a VFX shot that I need to critique, like in my brain, I would do all the work inside my brain, and I would
yeah,
like, oh yeah, I mean, that's probably a bit difficult to do, so maybe I shouldn't say that. Like, I already know what's going on. So whereas if you just show your shot to like your friend who is a photographer, like a photographer, and then they would just objectively, critique it from the visual standpoint, and it would like really help you
yeah.
grow
Well, and I
more.
would add too, like everybody is a consumer of film and ads, and
Yeah,
so yeah, I think of my wife, who very early on I would like say, hey, how does this look, and just like her initial just like gut response is always like pretty much right every time, and I know like, hey, does this, and it goes beyond effects, right? It's just like, does this
yeah,
ad work? Does this shot even look good? And just her gut response, like I said, because everybody watches movies, everybody knows how things are supposed to look. They won't be able to articulate what's wrong like you would, but they would just be able to say,
yeah,
it doesn't look real, it's wrong. And sometimes that can be helpful, at least a start.
exactly, yeah. uh Caleb's pro tip here on the chat. Caleb's pro tip: ask your spouse.
Significant
That's
other or
good.
whoever, yeah, they'll be honest with
Yeah.
you. That's the thing, they will be honest.
Yeah. um we're going to go through the shot, and we're not going to go step by step on this one because we're a bit over time. So I'm just going to go through of essentially what I have done here. And so on the shot, I have this guy running, and then we have this ground cracks, essentially some little earthquake here happening, or maybe like he's running really fast and he's like cracking
Yeah,
the ground that he's running on. So on this shot, this one is a little bit more complicated, not complicated, a bit more, should I say, like advanced than the previous ones, because here we have. So if we go to our plate here, just our plate. So first, of course, you need to track the shot, and for this one, I actually did not go through with a 3D tracker. I actually just did another planar tracker, but this time I turned the tracking data into a corner pin. So I can just add the ground cracks effect, which I have right here, like here. So we have this ground crack, and then I would apply the corner pin data into this ground track, so it tracked into the shot. The reason why I'm doing like a 2D corner pin data tracking instead of doing 3D tracking is because I need to have this ground crack to have essentially to stick into, not only stick to the ground, but also has the same perspective, you know, of the ground. And it can get a bit difficult. I mean, you could do like a 3D tracking and then just put this crack in the on 3D space, but it can get a bit like, you know, difficult trying to position it. Whereas if you're just doing it in 2D, you can just, you know, warp it around, you know, just skew the ground with a little bit and stuff like that. So it's much easier. And also, yeah, so with the corner pin, and the reason why we're able to do corner pin data tracking is because corner pin, we're tracking like the 4 points of that we want to track. Essentially, corner pin is like tracking a screen. If you want to do screen replacement, you're tracking each point of the screen, and then they would like generate a data that tracks those surface. You know, from those 4 points would generate the surface. And corner pin tracking here, I'm basically using Mocha. So if we actually can go back to Mocha here, and in Mocha here, if I disable all the different layers, I essentially just track like this bulk of this area and then generate a corner pin data. You know, here is the corner pin, and you see how it's basically tracking into the shot. And essentially, instead of having like the corner pin, uh, essentially like going like this, where it's on the same, you know, where it's flat on the ground. What I did is I would go to the final frame and then have the corner pin, like the initial point, to be the entire screen. So that way, it's gonna be much easier when I'm doing the cracks, because I don't have to manually move the corner. So basically, I can just put in the ground crack here into the shot, and then basically I'm telling, okay, so on this frame, I have the ground crack, and then warp it back into the shot as it goes back, you know. So that's a bit complicated. So I would probably, if you want like a longer tutorial for this, I would definitely make one. Um, so essentially, what I did is I would go to this final frame here, and what I did is I just add a freeze frame. So from here, I would add the ground crack, and let's disable 3D, and just work my way through the ground crack here and scale it down and rotate it. And now, so once we have this correct on this frame, we can then just put the corner pin data, like I mentioned, and have this as the initial, essentially the initial shape of the crack, and then track it backwards. So that's basically kind of what I meant, which of course I'm gonna go through a bit more detailed in a full tutorial. So on blending modes, on how to blend this ground cracks into the shot. Um, of course, we cannot do a screen because there is no like a white background here. So if we do like add or screen, it's not going to work. And the opposite of screen is multiply, which essentially just everything that is white is now see through, and everything that is black is now being kept. And it didn't work as well. So thankfully though, this ground crack is being rendered in essentially like a gray area, like in the middle point gray. So what we can do is to go with overlay, and there we go. So overlay is basically kind of like how add and screen and those groups are removing the black background, and multiply is removing the white background or the white color. Overlay is the middle, it's removing the gray area. So the dark area here is being kept, and we can see like a little bit of the brightness of the ground crack, but the rest are being see-through. And here we can see that it has a little bit of like a blue tint on our ground crack. So so we want to remove that by just adding a tint color and make it just like a really simple black and white color, and there we go. We have our ground crack. So that's essentially how to composite the ground crack. And if we enable all my shots here, so I'm not going to go through each step by step. So we have our ground crack, right? So for example, here I already have it tracked and I have the ground crack, but the problem with the ground crack is now that the ground crack is see-through, this like paint, sorry, this paint for like the this cross is essentially just floating there, because it doesn't move along with like how the ground cracks collapse. So what we can do to essentially like trick um, this texture here to collapse within the ground crack is to use a displacement map. So displacement map is here is so displacement map here I added it on an adjustment layer. And essentially a displacement map takes a value of a color value of a layer, and it would displace the layer based on the color value that it is referencing to. So for example, let's create a new solid here, and we want to say let's go with checkerboard, and let's put this to normal. So we have this checkerboard, and if we put our displacement map into that checkerboard, it's going to displace itself based on the color of the checkerboard. Right? So what I did is I have this ground crack layer that I kind of also blurred out a little bit, and then essentially using like the contrast of colors of this ground crack, I told After Effects to, hey, displace the texture of the street based on the color of the ground crack element, which is with all the different rocks and and like the shadow and stuff like that. And because we are able to displace that, so if we put this to 0 here without the displacement, and if we add some displacement vertically, it's going to displace based on the contrast of the ground crack. And if we add, so that was for the vertical displacement, and for the horizontal displacement we can do that also. So move it to the right a little bit, and there we go. So now, because it's going to essentially get warped based on the contrast of the ground crack, so now we can create this illusion of the texture of the ground being disrupted as the ground collapsed. So that's basically a really simple workaround on how to deal with texture when you're doing like this ground crack effect. And yeah, so that's something that if you want a full tutorial, of course I would make one, because there's a lot of things that I also didn't get to do in this one, but I would love to do more. And especially with this FILMPAC plate that is just really good, a really great plate. Yeah, just so many things you could do. You can add like a meteor maybe falling into this ground, and yeah. So those are like the four shots that I did using FILMPAC. And if we have any more questions, yeah.
The last one was a bit tricky, but I think. But most of the things I saw you do, it seems like pretty accessible. It's pretty
exactly.
For even like a pretty beginning editor, yeah, you got to know some After Effects, but like once you know some of those basic kind of concepts and principles, you can really do a lot with the right effects, with the right overlays. So.
Yeah, I mean, like when I'm like thinking of like VFX shots, and I'm trying to look for inspiration, what I would do, I would just go to FILMPAC, and look at all the different plates, and just looking at the plate itself, I would just have ideas for VFX shots. So Yeah, so here's a question. How can we get depth maps from real camera footage, as it is very helpful full for compositing fog and deep pixel stuff? I researched a lot but could not get a free way to take maps from video. Yeah, that's the difficult part. If you want to create like a volumetric effects from a shot that is shot in 2D, and you want to get a depth map, that's a bit difficult. Of course, I think there was like a bunch of like plugins, um, or maybe like an AI software that could generate like depth map, depth 3D, like a 3D depth map from a 2D plate. So there's that. Or if you want to do it manually, you can just do a simple 3D tracking and just put basically in visual effects what we call doing a layout, where you recreate the entire scene in 3D. You build the door, you build the wall, you build the chairs in the shot after you 3D tracked it, and from there you can just add your volumetric effects. So yeah.
One more.
Uh, do
Do
you
you ever
ever
have
have
to motion
motion
track
track
lens flares?
lens flare?
I
Yeah.
have a lot, a lot. Yeah, and sometimes, I think I try to work as fast as possible, and I try to look at a shot and like, does this need to be motion tracked, or can I just keyframe a pretty simple thing? Now, if you're quick with the motion tracking, you kind of have that process, memorized, and great. That can be a great way to do it. But sometimes, especially like, a simple camera panning shot or a slider, dolly shot, or even a lot of drone shots, right? They're very stable, very kind of consistent movement. Sometimes, like I said earlier, the quick and dirty way is just to, keyframe a slight position change, and that's all you need. So
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I've done that as well. Um, especially like really depending on your shot, like I said, or like the light source itself. If it's moving, then the lens flare also needs to be moving. It's really depending on the shot. And yeah, I guess that's our live stream. We actually have like one final question here from Kartiki. I hope I'm pronouncing it right. He's asking a bit about fusion, but I'm not going to answer that because we're doing in After Effects. But we do have a fusion tutorial coming up, so
cool.
take subscribe to the channel.
Yeah. Well, and thanks for
Yeah,
having me on, Danasa. Like, it was
yeah,
fun to be able to
definitely.
see your workflow, and obviously see some of our footage used in such a cool way. So, um, yeah, and hopefully I was able to, connect with some of the viewers, coming from maybe a slightly less experienced vantage point, but yeah, super fun, super insightful.
Yeah, I mean, thank you for coming to this live stream too. I definitely like learn a lot from your stories, and just like looking at all the shots that you've done for like FilmPack. Just looking at all the footage, I learned a lot about like cinematography, lighting, just from the way you shoot your stuff. It just informed like the what kind of like visual language, what can be considered like cinematic, because that's kind of like what we're after when we're doing VFX, and we want to make like a really cinematic VFX. And by just looking at like the shots, like the plates that you have, the footage that you have on FilmPack, it just really informed me about like, oh, so this shot is looking really dramatic because you have this light from this direction, and then you're
Yep.
shooting this person from this angle, and so yeah, I learned a lot, just from just looking at your stuff and just using it in tutorials. So yeah, and also yeah, thank you for joining us here, and thank you to all of you guys on the chat for asking questions and watching stuff. And again, we have our free for subscribers initiatives on our website. So if you are subscribed to the Action VFX subscription, you can get your elements, several elements, like over 1,000 elements for free. And of course, don't forget to visit FilmPack for your, cinematics projects, whether it's VFX or maybe just uh, add some plates, as add footage for your movies. FilmPack is the website for you to go and check out all of their stuff. And yeah, that was it from me and Caleb. And until next time, guys, bye bye.